And with that, we welcome General Jack Keane, retired senior Fox News analyst, former Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, and now President of the Institute for the Study of War. General, welcome. Jennifer and Jonathan have shared what they learned from the Pentagon and Israeli sources. How do you assess the situation in the Strait and this ceasefire now, General?
We are certainly entering a different phase with the ceasefire. I think that violations and attacks against Israel or American bases will be resolved within the next 48 hours. But we gave up military operations as a means of pressure for an agreement when we established the ceasefire. That doesn't mean, Marta, that we don't have influence anymore, because we really do. And that influence is making sure that we have it. That the Iranians understand this is a 2-week deadline and only 2 weeks. If they don't accept our conditions in Islamabad and there's no agreement in 2 weeks, then we will absolutely resume combat operations. That's real leverage. And what are the Iranians going to do in these negotiations? Because it's predictable. It's like dealing with Putin. The Iranians here are going to want to delay and prolong the negotiations and convince our negotiators that they're really close to reaching a deal, but that we need a little more time. So what happens then? We're going to extend the ceasefire for another week or two, and maybe a little longer when we're closer to the agreement. What are the Iranians trying to achieve with this? They're looking for as much time as possible to stall and allow oil prices to recover and to stabilize the recovery of the political system and take the pressure off the president's shoulders, which he certainly feels. So their inclination after several weeks without progress is to avoid resuming combat operations. I believe this is the path the Iranians are following. If they take the other path and are willing to give up their conditions and accept the conditions of President Trump's team, that's the best, but I'm skeptical about them. I know for sure that we have severely harmed Iran. They are in a very weakened condition, and our military has made that damage very clear. But they are still in command, and believe me, Vahedi, the leader of the IRGC, and Gabalov, the president of the parliament, are so aligned. Who really has been in command of Iran, and what was that about, and why? This ceasefire happened because they knew perfectly well that the only goal in closing the Strait of Hormuz was to stop the war, and they achieved that. But the reality is that if they are really willing to make a deal, that's a different story. Because I know this. Trump will not make a bad deal. He knows these guys. He has negotiated with them more than any previous president. And he knows that sometimes they talk a lot of nonsense, that they will try to confuse, that they will spread lies. And our team obviously needs to be aware of all this before starting. I assume they understand that. Our guarantee here is the president himself. He won't accept a bad deal. Going back to combat operations to explain, stand up. We have, so to speak, an ace up our sleeve. Yes, we do have a strategic asset, Kharg Island. Regarding this island, we can wait until operations are over to control or destroy it. If we control it, it will serve as a bargaining chip with the Iranians. 90% of their oil exports come from there. We would first say, hand over all the nuclear infrastructure, hand over everything, the enriched uranium, the centrifuges, and the remaining Cascade reactors. The same deal Bush gave to Gaddafi when we took over. And they dismantled and took away the program and other things we can use Kharg Island for. If you don't do that, we're going to destroy 90% of your oil exports. That would cause the collapse of the regime in terms of its economic capability. Because an economic collapse. So we still have a lot of influence. Here's my point, Marta.
I understand. And I heard your arguments that we lost influence with the ceasefire, but Kharg Island is still a source of influence. General, what did you think, quickly if you can, about the casualties? The president says they would receive part of the tolls from the ships over there. In the Strait of Hormuz, we have some numbers. The potential profit from Tehran's tolls could bring Iran $100 billion a year in fees if we allow them to do that. Your quick opinion on this, if you can, General. Thank you.
Well, Iran imposing these tolls is clearly a violation of the law of the sea. This isn't Egypt where they have that, a toll or a fee, because it's Egypt, the country where the Suez Canal is located. It's not Panama, it's the same thing. Panama's territory. This is an international transit waterway.
That's right.
And you are forbidden from doing exactly that. And in my opinion, we should force the Iranians to stop doing that.
The president says that maybe
he wants a share of that crossing fee, and negotiations are just beginning in Pakistan, with the next round scheduled for Saturday. General, thank you very much.
We now know that President Trump's threat against the Iranian energy hub led the regime's leaders to a ceasefire with the United States. But the two-week truce will only last as long as Iran reopens the Strait of Hormuz.
Regarding reports of face-to-face talks in Pakistan scheduled for this week,
in 2 days on Friday. The White House spokesperson said that in-person meetings are being discussed, but nothing is confirmed until the official announcement.
This will influence the meeting between the president and the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Mark Dubowitz, former Iran advisor to the Biden, Trump, Obama, and Bush administrations, explains to us. Mark, good morning. And I want to talk about the ceasefire and how all of this happened, but let me quickly ask you about that NATO issue. This will be an interesting and possibly heated meeting between two friends en route because, well, NATO hasn't been supporting us.
Yes, a meeting between two great friends, but the president is disappointed with NATO and its lack of contribution. We discovered in this war that we have strong allies like Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Ukraine. But unfortunately, most European leaders were not on our side and were critical. And we're certainly not contributing much.
Yes, Mark, you advised presidents like Biden, Trump, Obama, and Bush. What was happening behind the scenes looking at that 10-point plan? Where are we going? We don't agree on everything. So what happens in the next 2 weeks? How do we reach a compromise?
Well, the fundamental difference is that after 15 months of Trump in office, Iran has never been so weak in 47 years of its history. I mean, the damage done to the regime under President Trump is remarkable. He comes in with maximum leverage and 15 very clear demands to the Iranians. I think it's very unlikely that President Trump will agree to Iran's ridiculous demands. We will seek an agreement that removes Iran's ability to wage war and its nuclear capabilities, preventing it from threatening its neighbors or the United States.
Mark, I'm quite curious. You know, the president has accomplished a lot. U.S. public goodwill and his conflict management. But looking at the point plan, there's such a big gap between what the United States wants and what Iran declares as its objective. They want us to leave and for Israel to disappear. Is there any scenario in which the people currently governing Iran would actually agree to a lasting peace proposal?
Well, there is certainly a gulf between the demands of Zua and Iran, but the regime is now facing the prospect of complete elimination. Looking at the regime's obituary list, the number of commanders and senior leaders, including the former Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who have been eliminated by the combined forces of the United States and Israel, the regime needs to know it has a choice, a deal with President Trump, or they'll end up in the dustbin of history. Hormuz and this regime have lethal means capable of threatening the United States and our allies.
Okay, let's see what happens at today's NATO meeting. Are we leaving NATO? Thanks.
Mark.
Thank you.
Mark.